Hello and welcome to this presentation about cross-curricular learning. We will examine whether science and maths should be taught in a cross-curricular way. The presentation will explore the emergence of cross-curricular teaching, historical research, the advantages and disadvantages, and we will focus on maths and science and look at examples how they can be merged together successfully. Finally, we will explore ICT and how it can be incorporated into teaching to establish an empowering experience in child's learning process. Barnes in 2011 stated that it is of extreme importance that we develop a flexible approach to learning. We will begin by looking at what it means when we talk about cross-curricular learning. Barnes' definition is as follows: when the skills, knowledge and attitude of a number of different disciplines are applied to a single experience, problem, question, theme or idea, we are working in a cross-curricular way. The concept of cross-curricular teaching was brought to the forefront of political debate in the Haddow Report in 1931. Haddow reflected that child learning should be seen in terms of experience and activity rather than knowledge simply being acquired and stored. He argued it was important to recognize that children are not the same and we need to plan our teaching for the varying nature of children. The recommendations put forward by Haddow were not fully utilized until the Plowden Report in 1967. Plowden's ideas were similar to those put forward by Haddow, stating that the child was at the heart of the education process and that each child would have a different experience of how they saw the world. Hence, our whole experience of the world would be cross-curricular. The rapid progress by Prime Minister James Callaghan towards a national curriculum stifled cross-curricular teaching in British schools. The 1987 curriculum instead focused on core subjects such as maths and English, and hence children's learning became divided. Teaching strategies introduced by the government, such as the National Literacy and Numeracy Strategy, meant that teachers were focused on meeting targets and developing core subjects, that other foundation subjects took a backseat, and cross-curricular teaching almost disappeared for a duration until 2003. The Three Wise Men report in 1992 argued that more emphasis should be put on core subjects in the national curriculum to help raise the standard of progression and achievement by children. Cross-curricular learning has meant that core subjects have begun to lose their place in the classroom. And following on from this, in 1997, the government released the Excellence in Schools document, in which literacy and numeracy were again given significant importance. It stated these subjects must be a focus and that developing a mastery of the basics of language and maths was only the foundation for learning. In 2009, the Rose Review was carried out to evaluate the national curriculum. Its main points were that we need to design a curriculum that gives children the opportunity to benefit from subject teaching, to develop learning and personal development. It argued that the national curriculum is overcrowded and that effective learning is not occurring between subjects. This was similarly argued by Kay and Cottrell, who reasoned that programs which involve the children produce higher motivation. Despite the research carried out and recommendations made by the Rose Review and Plowden Report, much of this was not utilized into government decisions or policy. Learning is affected by complex interactions outside of schools, and therefore this needs to be considered when making policies in regard to education. Kay and Cottrell propose that programs should be fresh and unique to each group of children. The basic outline should stay the same, but we should also be developing new aspects of learning. This idea of giving children's learning meaning by using their daily lives is extremely important, and despite the proposal of flexibility from the 2010 government, in reality very little has been done to support the cross-curricular approach. If we take a look at the 2014 National Curriculum for the Mathematics and Science Programs of Study for Key Stages 1 and 2, there is evidence of cross-curricular approaches in both subjects. Therefore, it is evident that it is difficult to separate the two completely and that key areas from each subject coincide with each other to increase mathematical and scientific skills developed by children. Barnes argues that good cross-curricular teaching occurs when skills, knowledge and attitude of a number of different disciplines are applied together. He recognized successful cross-curricular teaching occurs when you provide a moral context for learning by building individual motivation. The teacher has to construct and use scenarios that require the perspective of several subjects and use multisensory experiences to generate inquiry and challenge. Good cross-curricular teaching combines the promotion of creative thinking with the maintenance of discipline and challenge. Nut Brown argued you can create a rich, stimulating environment with any topic if you present it with enthusiasm. She put forward that children cannot be taught effectively if planned learning is divided into subjects. They do not view the world that way and so will not view learning that way either. Critics of the cross-curricular approach argue it is difficult to assess. Learning occurs on too many levels and in too many domains to be susceptible to summative assessment. However, Barnes argues that any type of assessment can be used as long as it promotes learning. An example of this would be self-assessment, where children can use self-talk to talk about what they have done, and the teacher can get an understanding of what they have learned throughout the activity. Secondly, differentiation is another issue. Critics argue that cross-curricular learning needs to support the child's needs and interests, and there is no guarantee that this will happen. However, Nut Brown argues this is the responsibility of the teacher to provide experiences which support the child's needs and interests. They need broad themes and topics which challenge and extend children in different ways need to be planned. And finally, Greenwood argues that subjects must be forced together with very little interrelation between the two, and therefore you lose specific teaching content. However, if teaching cross-curricular is done in the right way, then the children should be clear of the purpose of their learning, and this should be the same in both cross-curricular and discrete subject teaching. The links between maths and science. According to Cross and Peat, science education has been designed as a means for children to become increasingly informed in tackling their own questions of the world. There is a huge creative element to science, and it needs to be approached positively to be successfully merged with other subjects. Nut Brown carried out an observation of 40 children in a nursery setting and found that all children pursued different schemas with mathematical and science. Nut Brown found that children all experienced different ideas of capacity, size, shape, height, tessellation, and spatial order. The children were interested in the outcomes of their own actions, and these experiences can be hugely developed through outdoor play and physical experiences. The range of depth that challenged the children to think developed both their mathematical and scientific skills through first-hand experiences. My experience of working in a Year 1 class has shown me how maths and science can be integrated successfully. In maths, children were learning about measuring using balances and exploring the concept of heavy and light. In science, they were learning about different materials and their properties. Their task was to create their own boats using different materials. They put together what they had learned in maths and science throughout the week to create their boats based on the properties of the materials and whether they were heavy or light. They then recorded their data, and they were encouraged in self-assessment. This developed both their mathematical and scientific skills. Another example of successful maths and science integration was demonstrated by Frost in 1997. She used the example of a class learning and working with mini-beasts to develop their observational skills. Children had collected mini-beasts from the park and were asked to draw the mini-beast, write facts from observations, and then record their data into a table. Johnston argued that this type of activity is cross-curricular in nature, developing both mathematical and scientific skills. The activity was meaningful to the children because it was not separated into discrete compartments. The children observed how the mini-beasts were joined, they identified the number and length of parts, they explored shape, size, and color, and they used observation grids to help them with size and used databases to help them read numbers. Our final example of successful maths and science integration is taken from the Primary Maths and Science Journal. This activity explored patterns and planets. Children were required to research planets using a different range of ICT. They looked for patterns in the data and used a database to create a scatter graph of the temperature of the planets and the distance from the Sun. By doing this activity, they were exploring patterns, examining relationships, and handling and presenting data, increasing both their mathematical and scientific skills. From the specific examples of how maths and science can be incorporated to increase the learning of the child, it is evident that ICT has a fundamental part to play. Cross and Peat trust that incorporating ICT with science is a great tool for young children to learn by improving the quality of scientific investigation, by making questions more approachable, and by helping the child to seek a solution and communicate with others about the process and the findings. Children are growing in a world where they are surrounded by technology, and this can result in positive learning outcomes, according to Johnston. It can be a stimulating way to develop scientific skills, concepts, and knowledge. We have looked at how history has affected educational policy and the benefits and drawbacks of cross-curricular learning. We have explored the strong, inevitable correlation between maths and science and examples of how they can be taught together successfully incorporating ICT. From the research presented, it is important to recognize that in an ever-changing and complex society, all children have different experiences, and we need to give them an opportunity to become independent learners and critical thinkers. This is only encouraged through well-planned and effective cross-curricular lessons that motivate children to take responsibility of their own learning. In addition, equally as important is for these children to have the opportunity to explore with ICT and make this an embedded part of their everyday learning.